Hey, what's up guys? So I finally did it. I epoxied my garage floor, and this floor used to be stained and super ugly, and I am so glad I took the time to knock this project out, and I did it for less than a third of the cost. And I learned a ton, and I want to show you exactly how you can do the same thing to your garage floor on this episode of Field Trader Designs. The first step was to peel up the carpet tile that I had placed from my back door to my garage office there, and it came up pretty well, although it did leave a sticky residue that I had to work on here and there when I power washed. Next, my wife and I cleared everything out. Luckily, I'm pretty organized, and so it was just a matter of moving the big pieces into the side room. The Polk workbench there moves really well. In case you haven't seen that video series, I would highly encourage checking that out. But yeah, just moving everything out, getting everything cleaned up, and once the floor was all kind of uncovered, you can now see, man, it is really as gross as it first looked. I mean, it is nasty. Like I said earlier, 50 years worth of stains and junk. And so I really want to help you see what I'm dealing with in case you're dealing with the same. Obviously, my biggest concern was, will the epoxy paint cover it and hide those stains for good? And I'm excited to say that it worked. The first thing I did was power wash the whole garage floor. I used a pretty inexpensive Ryobi pressure washer, and I actually did a review video on that if you want to check it out on my channel. But this thing works great. I wanted to get as much dirt and junk off the floor so that I could then tell what stains I would be working with. And I took a few of the things off the walls because of the splash factor. But yeah, just did a general cleaning, get as much out there down the driveway as I could, and then I'll return to do more detailed surface prep. The next step was to use some goof off stain remover, and I am applying that to these really awful spots. And so there's a lot of different chemicals and cleaners you can get, and so this is what I chose for the stains. There's also a lot of different methods on diluting with water and applications and set time and all that. And so for me, I just poured it straight on. I used the concentrate, and then after it was on the surface, I then used a bristle brush just to work it into the general stain area. I let it sit for a little while, then I power washed it all off. Next, I did a treatment with Zep Heavy Duty Citrus Degreaser. So the concrete stain remover worked decently well on the stains, but it had an interesting effect in that it made the outside areas of the concrete that weren't treated look a lot dirtier, while the stains kind of still stuck out. And so I wanted to just make absolutely sure that these stains were treated as well as possible to minimize any chance for the stain to come through the paint later on. And then the exact same process, I'm going to let it sit for a minute, and then I'm going to power wash it off. The third step in the concrete prep is doing concrete etching. So this is going to go over the entirety of the surface. I pour it into the bucket, then I dilute it with water to the right ratio for the square footage that I'm using. And then I stir it as much as I can to dissolve it, kind of like salt into water, although a lot more dangerous. And then I pour it into sections, but I have to act really quickly. It starts to hiss and starts to really have a chemical reaction on the concrete. And so I brush it into its spots, and then after I get that done, I power wash it off. So I had to go really quick. I couldn't film this very easily, and here's what it looked like. So pretty good. I mean, those stains are a lot lighter. I mean, it looks really bad on camera, even as I'm doing my voiceover work here. I mean, it still looks pretty awful. But if you remember what it looked like before, I feel like I've done a lot of good work. But it's funny how these different treatments make the concrete look a lot different, a lot splotchier. And so to be safe, I decided to do all three processes over the whole garage floor one more time. I sucked it up, I mixed a ton more stain remover, and then I applied it over the entire floor. Then I power washed it all out. Then I did the same thing with the degreaser. After that, I power washed all of that out. And then number 3, I mixed a whole new batch of concrete etching. And I did a huge pour over and brushing for the concrete etch one more time. I really worked it in, and then I power washed it again. After I finished, I let it dry for 48 hours, and here's what it looks like while it's drying, and I would say it was time well spent on the prep. Even though there's still some stains, it's gonna be great. Okay, from my garage floor, there was one more step of prep, and that was mixing up some easy Quickcrete to fill some holes and some cracks so that I could smooth out some areas of my garage floor. And so the paint, as I'm sure you've read, will not fill cracks, and so it's super important to make sure that you fill in any holes or cracks before you do your paint job. I just used a trowel to get the concrete into the holes and kind of smooth it out a little bit. And then while I let it dry and cure, I had some other projects to work on. And so one of them was to paint the bottom trim around the garage floor. It was mostly concrete, and so I primed it and caulked it, and then I'm using great stuff here and there to fill the holes, and then I painted it the same color as the wall, which turned out really well. Once the concrete patching was dry, I actually took my random orbital sander with some good grit sandpaper and was able to smooth them out, and it worked perfectly. I had never done this before, and even though there's a few little pits in it, after the paint, it won't be any problem at all. Okay, all the prep work's done. Here's what the garage floor looks like. It's a huge improvement, and I'd love to introduce you to my host, Andrew Bacon. All right, so I just went for a run, so excuse the short shorts. But I got the 2-car garage epoxy kit, and this is Rust-Oleum, covers 450 to 500 square feet. This, my garage space, and I'm gonna go a little bit outside the doors, it's 485. So I'm right in that sweet spot for coverage, but I've never done this before, and I don't wanna stress out about it being too thin or getting to like the last couple of feet and it not making it. So I bought a single stall kit as well, and this covers 2 to 250. So worst case, I have to bust this out, and best case, I have this. And then I bought 2 bags of chips as well, because I read that you need to sprinkle a bunch more, that what they give you doesn't fit. So that's what I've got. Let's open it up and read the directions. Okay, thank you, Andrew, AKA myself. So here's what's inside the box. This is the 2-car garage kit. Got the stir stick and the directions. We've got 2 bags of chips, and then you'll see here that we've got 2 large containers, paint cans of the base paint, and then there are 2 quart-sized containers of the activator. It also comes with the concrete etching chemical, but I had already used that. After I read the directions, I realized that you have to commit to the amount of paint you're going to use, because the base paints could be tinted just a little bit differently. So earlier I had said that I might hold the single car garage kit for later, but I had to decide to commit to using it because you've got to mix all 3 together and then redistribute them into their cans. And so I went ahead and bit the bullet, and I didn't want to run out of paint, and I'll show you how much was left after, and I think that I made the right call. But basically here, you have to dump all the base paint into a bucket, stir it up really well, then redistribute it into each bucket, because you want to activate each amount at the right time, because it doesn't have a very long pot life. Once the base paint was all mixed up and redistributed back in the cans, I put the lids back on, and then I matched them up with their parts, and now they're ready to go. Next, I consolidated all the chips from the different packages and the extras that we had bought on their own, thinking that we might run out because of what I had read online. Well, it turns out I had way more than I needed, so this step is not needed at all, but it gives you an idea of me thinking that I needed to be conservative with the chips and have them in 4 different buckets for 4 different quadrants, but as you'll see later, we had way more, so don't open them until you need them. Finally, it's time to paint. So I open the base, then I open the activator, and then I pour it in, and I've got my drill with the paddle on there to get ready to mix it up, which I highly recommend having this. And then you want to have a place for it to go when you're done, because I need to paint immediately. So once it was mixed, I then poured it into the paint tray. And so all of these supplies, I'll have links to them in the show notes below. And thankfully, my wife is helping me out here. And that brush is going to be used to paint the perimeter sections. And so I start by painting the outline, and I'm working in about 4 feet sections. So I do the outline, and then I get that done. I hand the brush to my wife, then I grab the roller and get started. The best way I can describe the paint is really thick, and it did change while I was painting, which was really interesting. So it started off really thick, the edging was really thick, the roller was thick, and then it was almost as if the paint kind of loosened up as it stayed out and was ready to be used to paint. So I really just went along and used the roller, and I was able to use the same roller brush for the entirety of the floor, which was kind of cool. So I'm gonna do my best just to kind of show you our process and go from there. So I did 4 feet-ish by 4 feet sections, and then my wife went behind me and sprinkled on the chips, and we learned that you didn't want to do too much painting because you wanted to be able to reach the sections with those chips. And we just kind of went section by section. I highly recommend having a buddy to help you get this done. By the end, I was so tired, and having my wife throw those chips onto the paint while it was still wet was perfect. And I think we're doing not a heavy pattern, but we're not doing a light pattern, maybe somewhere in the middle. And again, we still did not run out at all. We had way more left over. I was definitely curious about the stains, if I would start to see anything show through. And I can even say after a month of use, as I'm doing this video now, not any stain has gone through, so it's covering really well. Again, I'm really glad I prepped well. And so next, I had to go around our middle pole there, and so just like you would normally, I just grabbed my brush and just painted around it. And again, my wife is sprinkling those chips on, and we're tag teaming, which is working really well. All right, here's kind of a progress shot. Again, the sprinkling of the chips, trying to give you an idea. That was something that we just didn't know how it would work. And this is the quadrant we've gotten done. And yeah, it's looking really good. Time for quadrant 2. So I worked my way around the perimeter first just to get that knocked out. Then I was able to do an extended rolling time. And then after I got that done, my wife continued to follow up with the sprinkling. And so we're just tag teaming along here. And here's kind of a detailed shot, just giving you a look at how it's going on. And this process it's taking a while, but it's going on great. And every time I'm thankful for the prep work. Now we're almost done. It's the home stretch. So I've got a strip of painter's tape at the transition. I had put some Quikrete in there while I was working on this project to make that transition smooth. And so that line marks the end of the epoxy. It's going to extend a little bit beyond my garage doors, which is great. And so my wife is just following up, sprinkling. I am dead. I'm not going to lie. I'm so exhausted by this point. A couple things I want to point out is have a towel like I've got over in the corner there, ready to go for all the extra stuff that you throw down. I ended up staining my concrete on my driveway a couple times, which kind of frustrated me. Then my wife had to grab our blower, so have your blower handy or a broom because the wind was blowing in debris because it got a little windy. So that, as you can imagine, was frustrating us. But all in all, we got it done. I painted around those edges with the brush, and then I'm using the roller, and we moved along, and we finally got this thing done. Then we lowered the garage doors to about a foot open to allow airflow to go in, and then I blocked the outside with some wood. Then once it was dry, I grabbed a work glove and loosened up any chips that may not have dried on the paint, and then I grabbed my blower and I blew them all out just to prep the surface for the clear coat epoxy. And by the way, I think the clear coat, it's a no-brainer. I would totally advise doing the clear coat because those chips that are great for the coloring and the look of the epoxy floor, they don't dry flat or glossy, and so you want something to have an extra layer of protection and smoothness. Here I am popping the mixture of the clear coat finish that I'm going to put on, and for some reason this is not included in the kit. I have no idea why. I think it is absolutely mandatory to do the paint, throw the chips on it, and then add the clear coat, but I guess it is what it is. So then I cut open the corner to add in the non-slip material. It's kind of like a very light, coarse sand, and I didn't want to overdo it, and I put about 1/2 to 3/4 of the bag into it. And then here's kind of the dilemma. It's hard to mix, so I opened up the bag and I used the included stir stick just to kind of get it going and mix it as best I could. So then once I got that mixed, I then poured it into the tray. And so unfortunately the bag doesn't fit all the way into the tray, and so you have to pour about half the bag full and then set the bag down and try to not allow it to drip anywhere while you go and do your paint. And then it just paints on like I did earlier. So I just repeated the process that I had used for the epoxy painting, and I did the perimeter, then I would use the roller, and I had to kind of learn it was a little bit different texture than the epoxy, and I kind of just went along the same way. It's very hard to see what you've painted on, and so keep that in mind. And then the only other thing I would do here is I would have a towel underneath my tray. I don't know why I didn't do that, just to avoid drips and things like that. And then the other big thing that I did wrong was I underestimated. I should have bought 2 clear coat kits. So here I am at the end. I'm mixing up a new batch of clear coating because I had to run back to Lowe's and buy another one. So don't make my mistake. Buy an extra one just in case. I don't want that clear coat to be thin and stretched out, so I made sure it was nice and generous. But luckily it all worked out. I just continued on painting it and got it all done. Real quick, here's what I had left. So for the base, I had plenty of epoxy left, but I'm glad I mixed it because I would have run out. And then the decorative chips, I sure wish I hadn't opened those 2 extra bags because we had plenty. And here it is, guys, the epoxied garage floor. It's finished in all its glory. There's nothing on it. Everybody take your shoes off before you walk on it. You know, don't make Dad's floor a mess. But guys, this project, I'm so glad I took the time to do this. This is amazing. I think the amount of chips that we put in the floor, it breaks up any deviation crack of the old concrete. No stains have come through. And then obviously the clear coat is a must. So make sure you plan for that. Hey, I'm gonna have all the links and details in the show notes below or on my blog. Thank you so much for watching. I hope it was helpful. Don't forget to hit that like and subscribe, and I'll see you on the next video. Thanks.